Hey Shift, how are you today? If this is your first time with us, we're glad to have you here either in person or online. Community has never been more important than it is right now. If you'd like more info about us, you can scan this QR code, and if you fill out that Connect card, we'll send you some free Opus coffee. And if you'd like, you can check out the option to meet with Joe for that cup of coffee. The Gainesville Area AIDS Project is collecting food donations for Thanksgiving, so if you would like to donate, you can bring them here, or you can email them at gaap@gainesvillepride.org. Our next online-only service is December 1st, which is Thanksgiving weekend this year, and I'm telling you now so that you can put it in your calendar way ahead of time, because if you show up, you're gonna feel like a total goob. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. Next Sunday, there will be a town hall meeting for our LGBTQ siblings and allies. It'll be from 5:30 to 7:30 at First Magnitude. It's a time to connect and be heard. You will hear from community leaders about ways to move forward and be able to connect with area groups for support. If it's helpful, we hope to see you there. And that's all I have for you today. Now for week 2 of Stuff I'm Thinking About.
When people ask me how I'm doing, I think the only answer that I have right now is as good as this time allows, right? I woke up early Wednesday morning to a text message from my daughter, just slightly after 5 a.m. our time, and just full of dread, despair. I guess you could say that I went into kind of like mourning, right? I mourned for people that I love deeply, mourned for what was unleashed this last week that we've been seeing. And I guess one of the best ways I can describe it is shell-shocked. And some may have felt differently, and that's fine. But I think for almost anybody that's in this space, whether in person or online, we all felt that weight of fear and anger and anxiety, especially for those among us that are part of marginalized groups. And I started seeing people from the right and even in the church running right over those very legitimate fears and worries with calls for healing, calls for peace, calls for unity. And yet we still feel this very deep tension. Last week, we talked about how to care for ourselves physically, emotionally, and spiritually. At the time, I did not know how important that idea was. And then next week, we're going to take a look at how to channel all of this energy that we have into positive ways. But today, we're going to ask the question, how do we respond to this fractured reality without sacrificing ourselves or the vulnerable people that we're called to care for? How do we move beyond polarization? But before we do that, if you're comfortable, I want to invite you to close your eyes and to take a few deep cleansing breaths. Just in through the nose and out through the mouth, filling those lungs from the bottom to the top. Just releasing all of the tension that we're carrying with us right now. And as you can, to the best of your ability, to set aside the things that came before this gathering and to leave the things that are coming next for next. And just try to be present here. What do you need from this time together? And what do you need from me? As we go through this, things will pop up, things will resonate, things will really stick out, and take note of those things. Hold on to those things. And when different emotions come forward, meet them with grace and love. Take a few deeper diaphragm breaths, and when you're ready, begin to come back to the space. And I invite you to open your eyes. The early church leader, Paul, wrote a letter to a very splintered church in ancient Rome. And the letter was written because some years earlier, the Roman government had expelled all Jewish people from Rome, leaving this fledgling church to kind of flounder and figure things out by themselves. Sometime later, the government allowed the Jewish people back in, and the Jewish Christians came back to the Roman church only to find what they had left had looked different and it was changed. And there was division within the church, lots of polarization. And it is within this historical context that Paul pens the words to this fractured people found in Romans 12, verse 2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Now, for us, in this deeply divided and polarizing time, nation, church, I think one of the things that we'll have to do going forward is I think we have to reframe the question. I think we have to reframe how we're going to think about this. Do we want to win or do we want healing? Are we gunning for the W, right? Or are we going to work towards healing and wholeness? Because winning often means defeating the opponent, proving ourselves right. And we all know how much I love to be right. Or it's holding on to power. However, Jesus always invited people into something very different than that. Because the way of Jesus calls us into a life that is rooted in compassion and justice and healing, all of which transcend the idea of winning. And so I'm going to say things this morning that may create a lot of discomfort in you because it did me as I wrote it. Because I want to rage and slash and burn and then rage some more. That's what I want to do. But I also know that that road only leads to more destruction. And if we're going to choose this narrow way that leads to life and flourishing, it starts here. It starts with people like us popping up all over the United States, refusing to participate in the cruelty and the dehumanizing that we've seen this week. That we are going to decide to choose to move beyond what separates us in a way that respects ourselves and also others. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Humans are deeply emotional creatures, right? We are shaped by the emotional currents in our lives, and many of us were raised in systems, mostly within like these fundamentalist or evangelical churches, where shame was the main tool for self-control. We were taught from a very young age to cut off parts of ourselves. And our first acts of violence are often not towards anyone out there, they are towards ourselves. Boys being taught to cut themselves off from their emotion, as if having emotions lessens us as men. Little girls being taught to cut themselves off from their bodies because their bodies are temptations to men and therefore wrong. And it's these early acts of self-violence that create these systems of shame that we begin to operate within. And we learn to see the world and others through this lens that we've been given. And that shame gets weaponized and then directed at other people. And that manifests itself in judgment and distrust. Worse even yet is that if we're operating within that system of shame, it blocks empathy. When we operate from a system of shame, it is nearly impossible to truly see others with any kind of compassion because shame makes us feel that we aren't enough. And if we've learned to love ourselves by fixing or controlling or suppressing parts of ourselves, we end up expecting the same from other people. In her book, How Emotions Are Made, Lisa Feldman Barrett explains that our decisions, even those we think of as rational, are rooted in emotion. And she suggests that assuming that we can make purely logical choices without any emotional influence is actually emotionally unintelligent. Thinking that we're acting rationally while ignoring the feelings that drive us lead us to disconnect from ourselves and from others. So to move forward toward a new way of thinking about ourselves and about others, we're going to have to rewire how we see ourselves and how we see each other. And there's no way that Paul would have known any of these things writing those words, but I think that there's still wisdom in this idea of renewing our minds, and we can see it as this rewiring. He wasn't asking them to ignore their feelings or to stifle thoughts, but to open themselves up to a transformation that would deepen their understanding of God's will, a way of being rooted in love and wisdom rather than the fear and the shame that we're seeing right now. And in Jesus's life, we see this modeled so powerfully because he saw the pain in others. He held space for them and invited them to heal, but he also didn't sacrifice them in ways that would have left them empty. He took time away. He took time to be away from the crowds to recharge. He resisted the pressure to conform to what others wanted him to be. And then he went so far as to even set boundaries with his own disciples when he needed. One of the most moving examples of all of this is found in John's account of Jesus' life, chapter 4, when Jesus meets the woman at the well. It's a well-known story, right? She is a Samaritan woman coming to the well at midday, long past the time that the other women in the village would have gathered their water. And so we know from just that alone that she was othered within her own people. He approaches her, and by doing so, shatters racial norms that bordered on religious fervor. And he acknowledges her story without shaming her because she had been married 4 times before, and the person that she was living with now would not marry her. She is probably, within this town, she probably had the least agency of anyone in that village. And then he invites her into something greater. He doesn't offer her judgment, but living water. Look in John 10:4. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and what it is and who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. He doesn't demand she be different to be worthy of love. What he does is he shows her that she already is loved. And Jesus met people with empathy and not shame. And that's what drew them toward healing. So I think the real question that I'm struggling with is how, right? Like that all sounds great. But how do we approach our new normal? How do we exist within this system of deep division and fear with empathy and with the wisdom that Jesus puts on display? How do we renew our minds and move beyond polarization without losing ourselves? I came up with a few gentle suggestions of places where we can start. And I think the first place that we start is to acknowledge your emotions, is to honor yourself in that fashion, to give yourself permission to feel the rawness of this season, anger, fear, sadness. They're not wrong, they're human. Allow yourself to acknowledge those and process whatever it is that you feel without shame. Listen to what your body is telling you and respond to it. We ignore the signals that our bodies give us to our own risk. Your body is doing exactly what it was designed to do, so let it do it. I think the second thing that we can do is to set healthy boundaries. If you have certain conversations or environments that are draining or are unsafe, it is more than okay to set those limits. Boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about protecting your energy so you can engage meaningfully in the way that Jesus is calling us to. They can look like hitting that snooze button on Facebook or even unfriending people. And yes, I think it is 100% reasonable to lose friendships over these kinds of politics. We're not talking about, you know, how do we do the tax system and what does blah 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 look like and what about the transit? That's not what we're talking about. If those politics results in the dehumanizing of others, yes, 100%. What I won't do, and what I encourage you to be a part of too, is perpetuate the dehumanizing of those that we need to step away from. The third thing is practice empathy, but not at the expense of truth. So when you find yourself in discussions with people who hold different views, approach them with compassion as best as you can, but hold to your values. Because empathy doesn't mean that we have to agree with what they're saying. We don't have to like lockstep with their harmful ideologies. It means seeing that person and respecting their dignity, without condoning their awful behavior. Every single person we ever meet carries within them the image of God, even the ones that voted against you. We all have this divine spark within us, even if some choose to ignore that spark or tarnish that spark. That does not mean that we can't hold to our values of love and inclusion. It just means for some people, we have to hold them differently in ways that promote healing rather than winning. I think the fourth way that we can do this is rewire your thinking with small reminders. Just small reminders every day. When you find yourself defaulting to those old shame-based patterns and thoughts, just gently remind yourself of God's love and acceptance. You can repeat a phrase, pick a phrase, but it can be just something like, I am loved just as I am. I am beloved. I am made in the image of a loving God. Whatever that little mind, for me, Wednesday night, I couldn't go to sleep. My heart was pounding, my blood pressure was up. I could feel it. I am not prone to anxiety, but I had like a 10-hour panic attack, right? And I couldn't go to sleep because I could not bring my heart rate down. And I finally fell asleep around 2 o'clock. Like I said, I woke up about 5 o'clock. It was a fitful 3 hours. And anytime I woke up, my mind was like, oh yeah. And my heart rate would go back up. And I said a phrase popped into my head. It's the first song on the album Field Recordings, and I just lost the name of the artist, Zach something, doesn't matter. But he says in the chorus, um, wherever I may find myself, I want to feel at home. And I just repeated that over and over. Whatever's meaningful for you, grab that phrase and make it a mantra. These reminders help us retain our minds to see ourselves as worthy. And let me take that one step further. When we find ourselves defaulting to old shame-based thoughts about others, gently remind yourself of God's love, of God's love and acceptance for them as well. And you might repeat a phrase like, they are loved just as they are, or they are made in the image of a living God. The last one that I'll suggest is to engage in renewing practices. Spend time each day in a practice that connects you to God and to yourself. And we've mentioned this before, so it might be something like meditation or journaling or prayer or going outside and grounding, taking off your shoes and standing in the grass, right? But whatever that is, let those moments become an anchor in your life. And I think one of the most often overlooked ways of connecting is honestly just community. Like we are going to have to find our people, whether it's in places like this, be it here or somewhere else. or more likely, and please, a combination of the two. Don't let this be your only space. Don't rely on one space to provide everything. Connect with other people to remind you that there is still goodness in this world. Um, I think I think a lot of us have been like staying off of social media a lot recently. Um, I tend to not. But I did see there's a lot of really good stuff out there right now. And I did see this note that's floating around. It's literally a screenshot of notes written by Brene Brown. And in that note, she talks about um, that people who weaponize fear or despair do so to make sure that all of those of us who are despairing, stay in despair. And she says that the hope, or that the antidote to that despair is hope. And she suggests that hope is not an emotion, but it's a cognitive choice. And she talks about how she's like microdosing on hope right now and like just doing the next right thing, and that's the way forward. Um, the note reminded me of a dream that I had last week. And I actually almost used this in last week's talk, but I thought, no, that doesn't fit. I think it's for later. I'm not the greatest sleeper. Um, so I'll wake up. Sometimes I'll just wake up and my brain kicks on. And if it does, forget it. I'm not going back to sleep. Um, a lot of times I'm just done. But this night I woke up and my brain kicked on and started thinking about the talk that I was writing and some conversations that I'd had that day. And so as I'm laying there at like 3 in the morning, my mind is just kind of in that liminal space between asleep and dreaming and awake, right? Of being fully lucid, just kind of floating back and forth. And while my mind just kind of did what it did, there was this image that came to my mind's eye that I could see as clear as I can see you sitting here. Um, it was a single dandelion growing through the cracks of a sidewalk, just like that. And at the time, in my mind, as I was going through this, I thought of the dandelion as God or love. And that no matter where that crack is within any system, love will use it to grow. And I still think that that's true, especially right now. You will see love spring up in the most unlikely places, but not because of the sidewalk. Love will grow despite the sidewalk. But today though, that image that came to me in the middle of a fitful night of sleep is hope. This is hope. And we have to choose to be this. Places and people just like us, popping up through any and all the cracks in the sidewalk, creating more and more dandelions. So many that before too long, that crack can't hold back and the concrete begins to crumble under the pressure from all of the dandelions popping up. Yes, that is a slow process and will take far too long. And yes, people will stomp and pull and spray to get rid of the dandelions, and yet they will persist. And so shall we. The dandelion, the dandelion is the kingdom of God. And if you'll allow me some creative license, I'll end with a retelling of one of Jesus's kingdom parables. The kingdom of heaven is like a dandelion growing through a sidewalk. It doesn't look powerful and is often overlooked, yet it grows anyway, defying all odds, persistent and resilient. Even stepped on, it keeps coming back, spreading seeds on the wind. Try as you might to get rid of it, the life within it is unstoppable. finding a way in even the hardest, most expected places. We are the dandelion. We are the ones that look meek and mild. We are the overlooked, and yet we will grow anyway, even if it's against insurmountable odds. We will persist. We will be stepped on, and by doing so, more and more and more of us will spring up through the ever-widening cracks. Try as they might, and for the love, they are going to try. But the life within us is unstoppable and will find a way even in the hardest, darkest moments. We are the dandelion because we will choose hope. There is nothing anyone can do to take that from me, from you. I refuse to give you that power. There is no neighbor, there is no family member, there is no government agency that has the power to stop me from choosing hope. We are the dandelion. So my encouragement to you is to release those old systems of shame, to set your boundaries, rewire how you think and see, connect with each other, do all the things that you need to do, but most of all, keep choosing hope. As one of my all-time favorite theologians, Jyn Erso from the Star Wars movie Rogue One once said, all rebellions are built on hope. The kingdom of heaven is like a dandelion growing in the sidewalk. Existing where it should not be. Welcome to the rebellion. If you're new, we end each time together with a moment of observation and reflection. We do that to allow you time to listen to your body and listen to the Spirit. And so in a moment, the band, our singers, will come back up to sing the last song. Music's playing, so it's not an awkward silence, and the lights will be turned down to help create some intimacy. And I'll ask some questions to guide you through that process. And then I will pray, and we will take time for any that are willing to, for communion, which are the small cups in your seats. And each week we reflect on what was said and what we've thought about. And today let it remind us of the love of Jesus that grows any and everywhere. So like we began our gathering, I invite you to close your eyes and take a few deep breaths and allow yourself to feel what you need to feel. Today, I'm not going to ask any questions. As you breathe and focus on that breathing, what comes to you? And whatever it is, meet it with grace. Take a moment, and then I'll pray. Breaker of concrete and persistent presence, thank you for the resilience you've woven into all life. Like a dandelion pushing through the cracks, you show us that hope can spring up in the most unlikely places, refusing to be silenced or contained. Help us to lean into that hope today, not as an escape from what's hard, but as the courage to face it with love and persistence. When we're tempted to give up or let anger harden our hearts, remind us that hope is a choice, and that choosing it is our way of resisting everything that divides and dehumanizes. Help us to be like the dandelion, resilient in the face of opposition, planting seeds of justice, peace, and love wherever we go. May we carry this hope within us, a living sign of your kingdom, that you can break through even the toughest ground. Strengthen us, guide us, and grow us in that unshakable trust that light can still be born, even in darkness. Forgive us for things done and for things left undone. Give us eyes to see and ears to hear. Bring comfort to the afflicted, healing to the broken, and freedom to the chained. In the name of the one who shows us the way, amen. May the strength of the one who breaks through stone root us in love. The gentle persistence of hope be with you, and the brightness of the divine ever blooming light your path. As the dandelion finds its way through cracks, may you find your way through what seems unmovable. May you go forth, sowing seeds of peace, trusting that even the smallest act of hope grows and endures. Go in the courage of resilient love, the soft power of unyielding grace, and the peace that knows no end. Amen. All right, get out of here. Go love on some people.